Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. Um, Speaking of which, okay, what is the latest on this ridiculous boy? Talk about these Trump judges, right? So, I can't pronounce her name. I'm
Mary,
sorry.
Mary Kay Viscochil.
Exactly. Bless you. Um, but so she rules that Mark. So does he have to or not? There was a delay and
Yeah.
whatever, but she had
Oh, I've been
initially
I've been
ruled.
waiting to talk about
Yeah,
this one.
she has
So
to. He has to
the
answer a subpoena.
procedural,
Jim Jordan doesn't, but Mark
yes,
Palmer. Go ahead.
the procedural posture right now is Judge Viscochil um, sided with Jim Jordan over Alvin Bragg and said Mark Pomerantz must testify, but the Second Circuit Court of Appeals has already put a stay, put a pause, put a hold on that while it decides whether it wants to take the appeal. Here's my favorite part, though, Steph. In Judge Viscochil's opening salvo in her 25-page motion, she says Mark Pomerantz must testify because no one is above the
Oh,
law. Wait a minute, Judge Viscochil. You just sided with the guy, Jim Jordan, who issued this subpoena
yeah,
that you are enforcing, and Jim Jordan is above the law.
yeah.
He criminally defied the exact same kind of subpoena he just served on Mark Pomerantz. So I don't know if you were angling to be a character on Saturday Night Live, Judge Viscochil, but you just displayed the height of hypocrisy by ruling with a guy
Mhm.
who's above the law.
Yeah.
So and here's what I challenge all investigative journalists, Steph.
Yeah.
Judge Viscochil, you know what her qualifications were to become a federal judge with life tenure appointed by Donald Trump? For 33 years, she was a general commercial litigator in New York City. I'm not accusing her of anything, but boy, would I like to see what kind of business she did with Trump, the Trump organization, the Trump properties, Trump contracts. I'd like to see if there are any entanglements there because this 25-page ruling reads from Judge Viscochil reads like it was drafted by a combination of Jim Jordan's PR person
Yes.
and Donald Trump's criminal defense attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I don't get is their legal strategy in terms of, you always say as a lawyer, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. I mean, how does Mark Pomerantz testifying help them? I mean, isn't he
It
just going to
doesn't.
testify about what a giant crook Donald Trump is and that he should have been charged sooner? I mean, isn't that essentially it?
It's interesting because Jim Jordan wants to take Pomerantz's testimony behind closed doors. Why? Because Pomerantz will tap dance all over Jim Jordan's head because he's going to lay out exactly why he resigned after amassing evidence that Donald Trump committed a ton of felonies and they had enough to convict him. And Alvin Bragg put a pause on that. So, yeah, Pomerantz's testimony will badly wound Donald Trump, which is why Jordan wants to do it behind closed doors.
Yep. You said judge rejects Donald Trump's attempt to delay E. Jean Carroll defamation trial. Begins 4/25 because hashtag Justice Matters. I mean, that does seem like the good news is judges are running out of patience for this delay game he's been playing his entire life, right?
Yeah, and the judge who's presiding in that case has been like smacking down Joe Tacopina, Donald Trump's defense attorney. And the good news is there are other victims of Donald Trump's sexual assaults who will be testifying at the E. Jean Carroll case. The judge has ruled. So I give such props to Miss Carroll because look at all of the prosecutors who have been investigating Donald Trump forever, federally in New York, in Georgia. And what's the first case that's going to trial? E. Jean Carroll's case. God bless her. We wish her well. And I'm feeling good about the likely
Yeah.
outcome of that defamation suit.
Yeah. Give us an update on where on the document case and on J6. I mean, oh, excuse me. Also, Georgia. That seems significant. It looks like one of the electors is cooperating with Fani Willis, right? And then
Yeah,
documents
so
we've got.
The Georgia thing is a little legal, criminal law weedy, but basically one lawyer was representing 10 fake electors, all targets of Fani Willis's criminal investigation. And Fani Willis just last week had an interview with a couple of those fake electors, and two of them said their lawyer, a woman named Miss DeBro, never even communicated to them that Fani Willis made an immunity offer,
Oh,
which is
wow.
a big ticket ethical
Yeah.
lapse. Because
Yeah.
if a prosecutor makes your client a really beneficial offer, you had better fully communicate that to your client, or else let me use a legal term, you're screwed, right? That's a disbarable offense. And then the other thing that developed is some of the fake electors said other fake electors had committed Georgia state crimes that they had nothing to do with. Well, that means this lawyer is conflicted. She can't represent them all because one might flip against another. So all of these are good developments, but I will warn people, it could push the indictment even further down the road because of the necessity of getting 10 defense attorneys and negotiating with them. So, we're going to keep our eye on Georgia, but who the heck knows what the time frame is.
Right. And then obviously Evan Corcoran being forced to testify in documents case. What is your take on where we sit with that?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I worked with Evan Corcoran years ago. I had a case in common with him. So when he was a prosecutor, that is. It really is a big development when one of your criminal defense attorneys goes into the grand jury and testifies against the client about what he did, probably obstructed justice in the classified documents probe. Evan Corcoran has now removed himself as a lawyer from the documents case. Interestingly, he hasn't removed himself from all the other cases yet, but I have a feeling that's coming. So listen, Jack Smith is setting up the Justice Wood, knocking it down, getting everything he needs to get before he moves toward indictments. But I feel like that one grows closer by the day.
Okay. Everybody, can we just say, before we went on, you said my partner in homicide, and it took me a second to go, oh, you tried homicide cases with him. Okay. That's an important distinction. Yeah. But let's talk about, speaking of, were we talking about ethical lapses, human ethical lapse, Clarence Thomas. So Dick Durbin has asked Chief Justice John Roberts to testify before Congress about ethic rules for Supreme Court justices and potential reforms. What do we do about a problem like Clarence Thomas? What can we do?
Yeah, compromise at the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas ought to resign. I doubt he will, but I found it interesting that Senator Durbin politely invited Chief Justice Roberts to testify about the ethical lapses at the court and the need for a code of ethical conduct to be applied to the justices. Like it's a cotillion. Hey, would you mind come on down and testifying? I hope that when Chief Justice Roberts politely declines that they subpoena his stinking you-know-what, because this problem has to be wrestled to the ground. We cannot have a compromised Supreme Court, and we have to be willing to fight for it, not just take the polite declination and move on to the outrage du jour.
Yeah, agreed.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and healthcare benefits.